Good morning, Bitcoiners. Andrew says, good morning. Every day in America seems like April Fool's Day now. Luckily, we have Bitcoin. It was very hard to put together Moscow time this morning. Although I'd say the amount of April foolery was lower today than I've seen in previous years. So I'll start by saying the amount of April foolery lower, but not easy to put together Moscow time for today's show, simply because there's a lot of fake stuff out there, and it's already hard, despite what April Fools brings to the table. Just like Andrew says, the line between what's fake news, Moscow time, clown world, it's all the same now. We actually, with a lot of the banning of humor, we can't tell the difference between reality and humor anymore. We talk about it here all the time, right? So there we go. I got some good Moscow time for us. I definitely do. Bonjour, hi, Bitcoiners. B for victory, indeed. B for victory. That's what we're going to talk about today. B for victory. The theme is B for victory. Now I get it, Kevin. Oh, I'm missing a quote. I didn't hear from Kevin yet. I did not hear from Kevin yet. I don't think every single comment gets through, but I don't know. You know what I do know is that the sun came up this morning. I checked it out. It was there. Like, I got rays of red sun. And then I went and checked that Bitcoin's running. So we're good, guys. I got no emergencies, right? Who cares what's going on in America? Even though we love America, who cares what's going on? All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Where do I sat? Says Bon matin à tous. Good morning to all. The sun is up. Cardano is running. Cardano, yeah. That was a funny one. Good morning, P-Man Van, indeed. Good morning, McTimmy. Do we miss the camera looking outside, team? Do we miss it? You would have seen a dog this morning, by the way. One of my guard dogs just came to the window. He was out there. Do we miss it? I mean, when we get back to the farm, for sure, because the farm is too beautiful and I like the view. It was an okay view here. It's not really a view situation. Daniel says he misses it. That's what I'm reading here. Daniel says he misses the sun. So maybe we'll bring it back. Maybe we'll bring it back. The lookout. I could use it. I really dislike being late. I was like late again today by 2 or 3 minutes. My wife and children were out at the farmers market. They're finished ballet. We're only here for another 2 weeks, so we're starting to wind things down. And so she went to a farmers market that it only happens once a week, and we can never go because of etc. ballet and things like that. But the kids love it. A lot of kids playing around there. Gives us a bit of time to give. Oh, for me too. That's exactly what I mean. That's why I wanted to mention it this morning. I can't be a phony and have an empty cup of coffee while we have coffee together. I've never done it, by the way. There's always been coffee in here, so there you go. I've had it low. I've had sips, but I don't really want to fake it. I mean, I'm sure you guys would all understand if I had to mimic a sip one day. I don't think you guys would hold it against me, but um, I certainly give it a thumbs up, team. We like thumbs. We like the thumbs. But I certainly, I used that time, and it just made it feel like I was, probably doing something. It was what it looked like. So, I was usually, if I was late with the thing running for a minute, yeah, you're gonna have to trust me on that. Yeah, you can trust me on that, guys. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna lie. Um, where do I sat to ask? Is your farm in Vermont or Quebec? It's on the Quebec border, but in Vermont. And my neighbor, though, his kitchen is in Quebec, so that's funny. Yeah, I got all those houses with half. It's pretty funny. As you know, we like to start off right with a bit of Moscow time, with the fakest news we can find. Right, what's the fakest thing out there? So Politico, right? They came up with one. Opinion: Trump seems to be the victim of a witch hunt. So what? So what? Who cares? So what? It's hard to believe prosecutors would bring this case against anyone else. But that doesn't mean they're wrong. Come on, guys. It's fine. What about in France, right? A French woman faces trial and a 12,000 euro fine for insulting Macron on Facebook. But America did one better. They're going to prosecute that guy for the Hillary memes. So which one is it? I don't know. Very cool news in France. And here's the best one. This one's for everyone. You gotta follow this one, guys. I'm here with big help, bigly. I'm gonna help you bigly today. All right, everyone, you're gonna get bigly help. This is courtesy of major, CBS Broadcasting, CBS Boston. Boston. That's where all the smart people come from. They all have all those big universities there. It's right down the road from my farm. I've been there. There's all kinds of smart people. Here, they're helping you guys. I'm helping you. They're helping you. Guys, go get the flu shot because it helps prevent heart attacks. Did you know that? If you get the flu shot, you're not going to have a heart attack. That's what they say. Study science. They did science here, guys. Super science. Big time science. Very good. Very, very good. So, Karthik Sola says, green tea. I love the green tea. Don't get me wrong. I love the green tea. Lived in Japan for long enough, and South Korea. Had plenty of green tea in my life. I'm a coffee man, though. I can't abide by tea in general unless it's green tea. I don't, it just doesn't hit for me. I'm a coffee guy. I take coffee till about 3 in the afternoon, and then that's it. But as many coffees as I feel like, I don't really care. I don't count. There you go. So what a week, huh? What a week. A lot of people still trying to catch up with what's going on. So much. Let's do a little bit of catch up before we get into all the stuff that's fun to talk about. This stuff's fun to talk about too, but the Bitcoin specific stuff. But let's start with the Restrict Act. It was a prediction we made on this show a long time ago that you would see a type of A game from TikTok when it came to banning, and you would see lobbying at a level, at a professional level that would surprise you or maybe not shock you, but there'd be evidence of an amazing campaign, right? And that's what I saw. I saw evidence of an amazing campaign. And so this Restrict Act was the result of everything that was going on and all that kind of stuff. So David Sachs was using the All In podcast to go on about it. But the good news is, Rand Paul, if you missed it, I barely noticed a lot of people talking about Restrict Act. There's so much going on this week, right? So that's why I'm doing this. This is stuff that I myself learned. Rand Paul killed it. As I understand, pragmatically, and so the law was coming from Josh Hawley, a Republican, the Restrict Act. And you had Lindsey Graham, who you absolutely can never trust, right? These are some of the most crooked people going in the U.S. Congress. And so Lindsey Graham was trying to support it. He went on Fox News and said, I don't support it. But then after he did, it actually came from the Republicans, right? So that's one thing you have to be clear about. It was that this was the uniparty. It wasn't really the MAGA people, and it came from the uniparty. So there you go. And Vivek Ramaswamy says, pragmatically, that means Rand Paul vetoed Josh Hawley's bill from even getting past the reading. So it's not going to have any implications. They're going to rewrite it. They'll come up with something new. They'll probably try to limit it to exactly what's going on with TikTok, but who knows, right? And you got to keep looking at what's going on there. So that's pretty interesting stuff. But now let's just stop for a second and think about the week that just went by. Colin Rugg on Twitter, who's pretty good at this newscap stuff, right? I follow him for that. Here's his newscap of the week. Here it is, right? So Trump indicted for a 7-year-old hush money payment. Trump supporter convicted for sharing a meme about Hillary Clinton. 6 Christians slaughtered by a transgender. White House defends the transgenders. Rand Paul staffer stabbed. All right, so Rand Paul goes out and does that thing, but everybody missed it that he did the Restrict Act because just by chance one of his staffers got stabbed. Staffer stabbed. And then the last one, BRICS countries developing their dot, 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 dot. So imagine this entire week that we have and the BRICS story and the US dollar's role in global commerce, not even necessarily the biggest story if you follow what all, the Washington, D.C. and all that stuff. I'm sure Bitcoiners mostly following this BRICS story this week. But here's a counter to all that, right? So that's just what's going on in the mainstream news, the normie news. Here's what I think it's missing the vowels, but it should say Heartland Heartland Bitcoin. So HRTLND Bitcoin. Dan is his name, and that was his handle that I just read. So he also tweeted the following in conjunction with one of these weekly recaps, right? So remember all the crazy shit that happened in normie world this week, and now this is just going to be specific to what's going on with Bitcoin. US announces that it's dumping 50,000 Bitcoin. That's more of the Silk Road stuff from the old days. Lawsuits against Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, Ripple, Genesis, and more. U.S. Senator forming an anti-crypto army. GBDC shareholders demanding liquidation. Silvergate insolvent, biggest year-over-year rate hike ever. And that's sort of weak, but just the context of what's going on this week in the industry. And what did Bitcoin do? It was up 28% over the month and 72% year to date. It's a pretty amazing contrast. Think about the wildness of the week, think about the wildness of the industry, and then contrast that with what Bitcoin is actually doing. And what you start to understand about Bitcoiners is that psychologically, Bitcoiners are more capable of traversing all of this uncertainty, all of this anxiety, all of this change. Bitcoiners seem to have their feet on the ground, their head a little on a swivel, but not in a paranoid, anxious way, sort of conscious of where threats are coming from. I've said it many times, Bitcoiners, through our predictive capacity of understanding what ails the world, even this transgender thing, right? Like, first of all, no problem with what adults do with their life, right? Let's just always get that off the table. Never a problem with what adults do. They can put gerbils up their ass and I don't care, right? I don't care. Like, you're an adult. You can do what you want as far as I'm concerned. Now, what we got to remember, and a lot of people worried, are we fighting against a secret cabal of Satanist, transgender? You get a lot of that sort of brewing up these days, right? But remember, we've seen it as Bitcoiners. We have studied and we are aware of what happens when money breaks, when the psychological mooring that comes with money in a society, its ability to help you navigate, gauge, price things, and just get on with your life. When that doesn't work, right? We saw it in Germany in the 1920s. Germany in the 1920s, when the Weimar Republic was experiencing and the Deutschmark experiencing hyperinflation, you had a very similar situation. You had people turning to all kinds of sexual hedonism. It's a very common symptom and a correlative social condition that comes with money breaking. Right. So now I don't know. I've had friends who've gone to Bilderbergs and laughed at how stupid the people are there. Right. Is there a secret group of shadow people out there? Yeah, but it isn't exactly the comic book version. Right. There are definitely people with ambitions and goals and everything Soros does with the DAs, for example. Right. Very suspicious stuff. But we can keep our understanding of that a little vague as long as we know that breaking money leads to this stuff too, right? As long as we understand that the incentive models and, as we discuss on this show, the psychological engine that is the economy, right? The economy is really just a collection of our psychological orientations and motivations and where we want to head. And it's what allows us to make commercial relationships that either are fruitful or die on the vine and are stagnant. And we're living through an era right now where some of our commercial relationships just don't work anymore, especially ones in our major cities, right? It's very hard to get things done in a city these days just because of the amount of social breakdown. Now, I'd say commercial relationships are stronger than ever in certain fields, like in Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoiners more than ever understand and have predicted what is going to ail us. We have sort of predicted a lot of this psychological meltdown. If you had that gauge on what happened in the Weimar Republic 100 years ago, you would know that we would be having some of this. Hedonism isn't exactly the right word. We would start having some of these changes that would come real quick, right? These changes that would come real quick. So here they are, and the rest of the world, the normie fiat world, is having a lot of time keeping up, right? A lot of time keeping up with all of this. And Bitcoiners simultaneously are just moving forward every day, building a little more, interacting a little more, finding new opportunities. Even, I wrote a thing yesterday with Chat GPT, and I asked it to create a strategy, right? I was a strategist, so throwing um, context in and having ChatGPT spit out a strategy is a really good use of ChatGPT, by the way. And it did something. So I said, how could Bitcoin become the psychological reference rate for energy markets, right? So how could Bitcoin ride up the middle between US problems with the settlement of energy contracts and energy markets with the dollar, and everyone sort of bailing from that, right? We've talked a lot this week about Saudi Arabia settling and Chinese yuan with Chinese, Brazil doing the same. Lots of commercial relationships going bilaterally between folks. We spoke yesterday about how perhaps there's no real benefit necessarily for the United States to be the global reserve currency. If it traded in just current account balance against other countries, it would probably be better for America. Lynn Alden had a long Twitter thread yesterday precisely focusing on this, about how America has exported so much of its manufacturing base as a result of being the global reserve currency over years, and other countries manipulating US currency in order to keep their exports cheap for America, thereby making Americans into the greatest consumer blob in the history of blobs that consume, right? So that has happened in America. And Lynn Alden was saying that's probably not the best, right? We've had subsidized narcissism in America. The rest of the world subsidized our narcissism, subsidized the hole in our heart that comes from eating too much, right? And gluttony and all the other things that seem to afflict America these days. So again, the psychological engine and the repercussions of tinkering with a psychological engine has produced a result where Americans are addicted to food probably more than anyone else in the world, partly because purchasing power in America was subsidized by these other countries. And maybe that's not a good thing, right? So lots of people talking about that. I think Bitcoiners have been talking about that for a long time. The incentive model that comes with inducing a consumption mindset is heavily greased by having debt as money, and by having, it's why in America we can't tell the difference between someone who's in super debt and someone who's really wealthy. They look the same. They're the same thing as far as we're concerned. If you have a ton of debt, you might be rich, right? You might not be. You might be totally broke, right? Like the country itself. It can look rich, but it's totally broke, right? When you look at current accounts and all that stuff. So it's sort of all there, and Bitcoiners are navigating it as best we can, right? As best we can. But this resilience, right? This resilience also helps us plan, and it helps us have that long-term window, and it helps us, I think, avoid one of the psychological traps that seems to be laid out there, which is thinking past the sale. That's why we yesterday talked a lot about this brain dead response to everything that's going on with the Trump indictment, right? It was, no one is above the law, right? Nobody is above the law, right? It's kind of one of the stupidest things you're ever going to hear, because it forces folks to, well, it's very clever, devious. I mean, very devious, right? Super devious. But it forces people, of course, to argue whether, almost assume that Trump is guilty, and that it's about whether or not he should be subtracted from the legal system simply because of his position, right? And things like that. When no one's actually arguing that, right? No one on the other side of the argument is saying like Trump is above the law. Some people should be above the law. No one's saying that. Right? Nobody's saying that. So it's not only a straw man, it's a slightly more devious trick where you're going past the sale and you end up having people who are trying to defend this point about Trump being above the law, which is a silly point to have to defend, right? And you saw it yesterday in the and you saw it yesterday in the um, you saw it yesterday in all the debate around what's going on with Trump, right? People sort of assigned that opinion and just propagating it all over the place, and you're getting this reaction out there, right? But because Bitcoiners have predicted a lot of this stuff, and because Bitcoiners sort of already understand some of these manipulative tools, we're not getting caught up in it. And so I asked ChatGPT for the strategy on what could help America and help Bitcoiners become the actual reference rate for energy. So here's what it said. It understood what was going on with China and BRICS, and I gave it a bit of context and said, America also losing all of these relationships, losing all of these commercial relationships, other commercial relationships starting, and it gave me a great idea. It gave a whole like 5-point strategy, but one thing it did that I never even thought of, and it could be actually a very interesting commercial opportunity, is just marketplaces for energy contracts settled in Bitcoin. So much like what the stock exchange in Shanghai is going to be offering for oil contracts settled in yuan, and the futures part of it, and the risk management side of it, and all the stuff that goes on, the hedging and all that. I mean, it looks like all kinds of shitcoin markets are getting shut down, right? We had all these things that we just mentioned about the legal cases against Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, all that stuff, and that's real, right? That's happening. So at the same time, Bitcoin more and more um, looking for other markets that it can trade in, not just P2P exchanges uh, for people buying Bitcoin with fiat, but what else can it trade against? What else can it facilitate? And ChatGPT said, create an energies market where everything's settled in Bitcoin, and that's a hell of an idea, right? So trading commodities for commodities means you don't have to worry about the securities and how we test, and you're gone from the SEC at that point. They don't mean anything to you. The CFTC matters, but you can avoid that by being offshore. I think the point is that you don't want to use US dollars. So anyway, I'm going to start bouncing that idea around with some of the exchange people that I know, and I know enough of them. So maybe that'll get built. We'll see. But ChatGPT, again, giving us some direction about where to go and what we can do, and good strategies. And I thought about that yesterday, just this idea that with Bitcoin and AI, you see all of this catastrophe, all of this stuff falling apart around us, right? And you can start to imagine that, are we even going to rebuild it? Like, all this stuff, America losing its reserve currency status and economic catastrophe. And I think with the tools that we have, none of this will matter in the end. I think we can avoid it all, in the sense that, and even our decayed democracy, right? Are we going to fix that? Are we going to fix our broken cities? Are we going to fix our decayed democracy? Are we going to fix our broken financial system? Are we going to fix our broken trains and our rail? I'm leaning to no. Like, I'm leaning to not fixing it. And I don't mean that we're going to go down the toilet. I'll get into citadels in a minute, and what we can do, and what might happen. But the story is bigger than just that. That's why I've been predicting for a long time that a major industry of the future is just new cities, right? Just building new cities from scratch, new infrastructure from scratch, totally new, fit for a world that has adapted and changed. And I think AI can help us with that, right? I think it can help us get over the learning curve of having to build some of these things and help people adapt, and all that. So I think it's coming. I think we can do it. But when because even think of, like, here's Glenn Greenwald, right? Just on how bad American democracy has gotten, right? A key hallmark of an authoritarian faction is a craving to see one's political adversaries imprisoned. Another is a desire to censor their speech through a union of state and corporate power. Another is the reverse of the reverence of the security state, so the CIA, FBI, NSA, and that all three of those are starting to play out in America. That we have all three of them now, right? We have uh, um, seeing your adversaries imprisoned, right? And Trump started that, right? Lock her up, right? I thought that was a bad idea at the time, right? And now I am no one to give Trump advice on how to get attention and how to get an idea out there. So you're watching a genius when it comes to persuasion. So I always, when I said, I don't know about this lock her up thing, like, might not work out in your favor, right? Or might not be a good and wise way to frame things because it'll get worse. Just like now that we see Trump on the other end of that with this AG thing in New York, right? I can start imagining this going all over and snowballing across America. So I don't think we're going to be able to stop the decay of democracy. Like that. That's not something I think we even need to stop and fix. I think in the end, the saturation of politics in modern life is just going to turn a lot of people off, and the money will run out. It won't just be fiat. It won't just be the ability to print money. A lot of these Janet Yellen regulator types are going to have to live in a world where they don't have unlimited resources because the chaos of their failed policies and everything is causing this broken brain epidemic in America. And eventually people are going to want to be healthy again, I think. And the answer is not going to be vote for a political party and then you get better policies and things will get better. I mean, that might happen. I think the answer is going to be people ignoring it and going on with their lives and just like, what did DC say? Right. I mean, that's kind of how I am. I'm not that worried about what happens in Washington D.C. or in different governments, and I continue to think of them as now. I know clown world is kind of a meme that might take the sharpness or the edge off of what you should be afraid of, in the sense that there are dangerous, evil people out there for real. You got to accept that there are evil people, right? There are, like that. What I just said earlier about Bilderbergs and all that, that's not to say there aren't super evil people in the world. I 100% believe that. And you have to accept that there are people who are more evil than you can imagine, operating at a very powerful and influential position, right? So not denying there's evil people at all. Um, but how do we get out of it, right? How do we get out of what's going on, and how do we make it not just as Bitcoiners, but as people, right? Well, with the U.S. dollar changing so much, you're seeing this, let's say, mental illness spread throughout, right? And Beauty On brings up a great example here. So Beauty On says, and this is this video of Phoebe Plummer, and you could see she has all the telltale signs of an inarticulate young person who's filled with anger and not able to express themselves, not able to, just a shit education, I bet. No capacity to think in a linear or logical way, no ability to create syllogisms in their mind, and it certainly hasn't read Aristotle's rhetoric, right? Like, no concept of how the human brain uses language to propagate ideas and conclusions and persuade. So she just has a typical conniption on stage or on the TV set, talking with Jacob Rees-Mogg. So the son of the man who wrote Sovereign Individual, if you didn't know that. So Jacob Rees-Mogg is William Rees-Mogg's son, and he wrote The Sovereign Individual. So he's interviewing this person. And Beauty On says, this is the mental illness all Bitcoiners are going to have to confront and defeat. Fueled by Greenpeace and Change the Code, hysterical, adrenalized, I like that, adrenalized, right? Students who can't reason will shriek at Bitcoiners and turn to violence because no one is listening. Now, I think Beauty On is right on. I think this is correct, right? I think we are going to have to a certain extent, confront the broken brains and the people who are having a hard time navigating what's going on, and who are filled with fear and can't express themselves and, have a broken brain, right? They're having trouble with what's going on in the world, and the psyops and everything are just falling on top of them, right? And it's gonna, in a sense, get worse, right? It's gonna, in a sense, get worse because let's look in on our friend JP Conning, right? Let's look in on our friend JP Conning. So JP Conning, first of all, his pinned tweet, right? So you guys know what JP Conning is? He's another guy from Montreal. So I've known him. I've never actually met him. I've just followed him. He wrote for CoinDesk for a while. What I like about him is he's into like old specie of money, right? So old dollars, old bills, like old paper money, old coins. He's kind of a collector and an expert in that stuff, and I appreciate that. So I still follow him, right? He's into monetary economics, history of money. So I like that part. Central banking, financial privacy, payments, financial inclusion, cryptocurrency, monetary law, and financial crime. So when I was working for the Senate in Canada, I'd sort of come across his work back then. So I've known him for that long. So it's been over 10 years. His first article here is his pinned tweet is the Fed is introducing its first instant retail payment system, Fed Now. Will faster payments translate into faster bank runs? We don't know. But here's what he says, right? And from now on, I'm going to do my impression of him with some glasses on. Right? I got to put some glasses on to be JP Conning. I'm JP Conning now, right? You know who got me to stop wearing these casually and every day? I wear these for driving. It was Cernovich. You know, I wore these, I got these glasses in college, right? And I was with Cernovich doing a show a couple of years ago, and it was on psychedelics and Bitcoin. It was like for a private audience, and Cerno was like, he made an offhand comment about people who wear horn rim glasses, and I never really thought that it was like a follower thing, right? And you know, my whole family had been saying for years, like they're not really you, you know, they're not you. And indeed, I'd never seen them as like a crutch, you know, as like a fiat crutch. And I found them. That was the first time someone had ever said it, and I realized it was kind of like a projection of I'm serious or whatever, right? Now, I'm anyone who wears horn rim glasses, go for it. I'm not trying to tell you no, but I'm going to do my JP Conning. This is my costume now for JP Conning. What are the biggest errors committed by national leaders in the money and payments policy space over the last decade? My choices: Modi's demonetization and Bukele's Bitcoinization. Both overwhelming failures. The good thing is the rest of the world seems to have learnt from these mistakes. So far, no country has tried to copy Modi's shotgun monetization or Bukele's Bitcoin gambit. So he does a whole nother piece here too on the dollar is more dominant than it was 15 years ago. And that's only because the European Union and the euro has been cut off at its knees. So it's all dollar. So he's saying that it's all dollar going forward, right? Because it's stronger now because there's no nation state to compete with the US, and the BRICS thing's not going to work. And Bukele's thing, dumb, stupid, right? The dumbest thing he's ever seen, he says, right? The dumbest thing. That's what he's saying, right? The biggest errors committed by national leaders and Bitcoin for Bukele in El Salvador. In his mind, is he right? I think he's an idiot. You know what I mean? And here's why. The US dollar, if it's creating the kinds of troubles we see because itself has been hollowed out by policies, mistakes, hypocrisies, if no one actually believes it anymore, it is a psychological engine. If people do not embrace it, if people don't want to propel it forward, they're not going to. Now, I think there are enough people in the world that don't follow politics, that don't have a broken brain, that just want to go to work, that just want to get on with their lives. They want to be productive. They want to raise their family. They want to do all these things. All of those people are going to opt out of the US dollar eventually because it's going to come with all of the political repercussions. And I'll tell you how I know. We predict a lot here. Janet Yellen is now signaling, right? This came from yesterday, that the next thing they're going to regulate is shadow banking. What's shadow banking? It's the hedge funds, it's the money markets, it's the crypto exchanges, the Bitcoin exchanges. So we've known for a long time they're coming for it, right? We've known for a long time they're coming for it, and they're priming people. They're getting people ready. And if you don't know about priming, right? If you don't know how the human brain works, priming, right? So Brian Rommel, who I'm trying to get to speak at Bitcoin 2023. He's one of the leading AI guys. He's the one who broke the ChatGPT system and made it open sourced and using the alpaca from Stanford. So he's been talking about this for years. And here's what he says. Over 6 years ago, the AI I built in my garage lab with piggy bank money made a massive discovery about human perception. It can be primed. So he shared that video that everyone's sharing today or the past few days, where I forget what the two words were, but if you hear this, it's whenever you hear two words, and if someone says the word before, that's what you'll hear in the audio recording, right? I can't remember. He tweeted it with this, but I unfortunately cut it off before. So he says, over 6 years ago, a massive discovery about human perception. It can be primed. I have been the most annoying here on presenting the reality of the human OS, the human operating system. Today's AI knows many of the edges of our perceptions. In the case of priming, consider an audio track of an event. One cohort has been subliminally primed to hear certain words, while the rest of the observers hear something else. This confused situation is relatively easy to do with today's free AI tools. Our strengths are in knowing our weaknesses, right? Our strengths are in knowing our weaknesses. Our strength is being humble, that you start any journey understanding that you may be wrong in all prior assumptions. If not, you will hear, see, feel what you have been primed for. Buckle up, I have seen the road ahead. So he's talking about narrative bias. He's talking about not having an ego, right? Stay humble. That's why it's mimetic in Bitcoin. Stay humble in stack sats is one of the most important things. The humble part in particular, right? The humble part in particular is very important. So I don't know what's going to happen with the US dollar. I don't know if it's good or bad, or if other countries are going to beat it, or all of those things. What I do know, what I have observed, is the institutions that have brought us here have failed. And they are responsible in money management, in the way we've managed our currency, for the psychological problems we see all around us in America. And when I see someone like Bukele, right? When I see someone like Bukele do what he did this week, so of all the things that went on this week in the world, Bukele came through on his promise to eliminate taxes on property, capital gains, import tariffs, tech innovations, software programming, coding apps, AI development, computing, all the things that we talked about last week, right? He came up with this big list of things and taxes he was going to eliminate. He did it yesterday or 2 days ago. They're gone. They don't have these taxes anymore, right? They're just gone, like gone. Now, go back to these people who are sick of U.S. cities, who are sick of the terrible things that are going on in state governments, in federal governments, all over the place, right? The decay of our cities, the drug abuse, the violence, and now the regulatory overreach, right? The legislative overreach. How long before more Americans run away to places like El Salvador because they just want to have a normal life? They don't want to be saturated with politics. They don't want to have to deal with the mentally ill people that Beauty On has mentioned here. And indeed, there is confrontation coming. But more, I think, there is just going to be a desire to move on and build other things, and other things might rot, which is why my prediction that we're not going to repair New York City. Like, I don't think we're going to repair it. I mean, why? You can build a new one. You can build a brand new one in El Salvador or anywhere else, right? Where you're going to get a better deal. Or even in Trump's plan to build the 50 freedom cities. Now, again, our salvation is not going to be through voting in Washington, D.C. I don't think it's going to work, right? The Trump can do the ballot harvesting. He can go crazy. He might win. He might. I hope he does. But it's no longer an easily predictable environment. It was so scammy the last time that it's hard to imagine it won't be scammy again, right? How is it not going to be scammy again? Is it going to take a month to count the votes all across America because everyone ballot harvested? I mean, is that going to work? Is that going to work? If you think about what happened in the 2020 election, right? I think what happened was the following, right? I think the night of the election, the plan always was with the DNC that they knew they had done so much ballot harvesting and they would have enough votes to get over the line. When the voting stopped, it's because the logic of Trump going into the next day with the vote counting started, with having such a big win, would have impacted the capacity to manipulate and persuade the population that he didn't win, right? And I think they knew he didn't win before, right? I think with the ballot harvesting, which was legal, so I'm not claiming illegality here. I think he lost according to the rules. I think that, right? I think he lost according to the rules. Was there software, hardware, firmware? We don't know. We don't. No one has ever looked for cheating. No one's ever looked for real. There's courts who have said no, but they said no to looking. They didn't say no to this is what happened in the election. Right? They didn't do that. There's no court capable of a forensic audit of ballot machines and software and hardware and none of that. Right? It never happened. So we don't know. I can see a scenario where he lost fair and square according to the rules because of ballot harvesting. But the thing that happened on election night, the vote stopped and then they put the ballots in because I think they knew that cognitively and persuasion wise, it would be much harder to have Trumpers celebrate a win and then take it away from them versus a murky situation, right? So I think that's what happened. Now, when you get this priming thing, right, that I mentioned with AI and Brian Rommel, you look at what Janet Yellen is saying. She's coming after more. It's not going to stop, right? It's not going to stop. They're going to keep coming after businesses, keep coming after the heart of the economy, keep coming after the people who make the thing run, right? It's Atlas Shrugged, right? There's Gulch is here now, and what's Gulch going to be, right? El Salvador. Well, Beauty On said go to El Salvador because we're going to have to confront these people. I say we're still going to be building new cities. There's enough virgin land in the world, deserts and all kinds of things that we can terraform, that we can manipulate. I think that future city building is going to gather all the people whose brains aren't broken, who are still functional, who have AI, who have solid commercial relationships built on Bitcoin, and they're going to be able to build new cities no problem. Are they going to take people in? Yeah, I think everyone's going to get over it eventually. I don't think we can sustain this amount of psychosis in our society for very long. It left Germany eventually, right? It took 20 years or something, but they got rid of it. Well, they got their own fucked up problems now, but they never really gotten over all of it. But it's folks like JP Conning here, and that's why I mentioned him, that simply don't understand that the US dollar is not about trade or volume or because that's what he does. He brings these charts, right? Oh, the volume is up, right? I don't see de-dollarization happening at all, right? It's more powerful now because Europe is weaker, so there's more demand for dollar. Well, if it was in charts, if math had anything to do with this, maybe he's right, right? Maybe if math is the main driving factor here, maybe he's right. Maybe. What I see is people who are being turned off of the whole machine, and when that happens, right? When people don't see capacity to perpetuate in the future with an economic system, they don't see any reason to build with this stuff. I mean, who are they going to get in America to work with this government going forward? It's just the broken brain people. It's just the people like, what's her name? Phoebe Plummer. She can't even speak. She can't make a sentence about the thing she's most interested in. She can't handle one question from, I don't know if you guys know Jacob Rees-Mogg, William Rees-Mogg's son. He's one of the most gentle, polite people in the world. Like he's not even, he's I guess maybe intimidating from a mental capacity point of view, but he didn't ask her hard questions. He didn't ask her anything difficult. And of course she couldn't handle it. Broken brain people are not the ones you want to build a new society with, especially when it's being compared with things like El Salvador, where they're getting rid of the broken brains. They're importing all of the strong brains, and the smooth brains are just sticking in America, complaining about Trump, why can't I go to a drag show? Why can't I, like the smooth brains are going to have an even harder time adjusting. Whereas I think Bitcoiners have already adjusted. They're ready for this. They're ready to build new cities. They're ready to build, to go on the pioneering front and remake things and start over. So again, I don't, Beauty On says we have to confront it. I think we do. But there's also the option of just going elsewhere and rebuilding. And my feeling is in America, where I'm from in Vermont, for example, it might as well be empty. there's nothing left, right? The people are, they're not gonna, there's no commercial activity. There's great farmers, there's some stuff going on, right? There is some stuff going on, but just from a demographic point of view, we're dealing with the last of the last. I mean, Vermont, just like England before it, sent a lot of its brightest sons and brightest daughters to Oregon, to Washington, to California. They helped pioneer the rest of the country. They haven't been receiving any immigrants in since the Irish potato famine, basically, right? Nothing. Like no one's moved there. Nobody. It's emptying. And if a bunch of Bitcoiners went there tomorrow, they could take it over without much trouble. The same way Bitcoiners did over in Wyoming, right? It didn't take much. It wasn't that complicated. You can do the same. I think Bernie's seat is going to go to a Bitcoiner next. I believe that. I believe Bernie's Senate seat is going to get taken up by a Bitcoiner. And it's not going to be a progressive. It's not going to be any of those things. It's just going to be a Bitcoiner. Because any of these small states that are susceptible are going to get co-opted by the only people who are still playable characters in the game. Too many NPCs on the Janet Yellen side. Too many people who don't know about what Brian Rommel just said, which is that the human brain can be primed, and that if you don't stay humble, if you are like JP Conning and believing that, oh, the US dollar's trade volume, it's got trade volume, man, don't worry, it's going to live forever. Look at the trade volume. The trade volume's up. The trade volume's up, right? If that's how you think about the world, right, you're forgetting the most important thing. You're not understanding your weaknesses. You're not hearing, seeing, feeling what's coming. I mean, Bitcoiners can feel the world changing. We can feel the energy shift. We felt it for a long time. We felt it before anyone felt it, right? I had someone told me years ago, and it was when, in the 2017 run, anyone who'd been around all of a sudden was not in the same economic conditions they had been years before, right? I don't want to say rich because then that makes you, it's like a fiat thing in that sense, right? Like don't, it was only the exchange rate with the US dollar that gave the appearance to some people that we were rich, right? And I was on Wall Street at the time and was talking with the Wall Street folks, and I was talking with downtown Josh Brown, a great guy, right? Well, sometimes it can be a little crazy. He was a definite TDS, Trump derangement syndrome guy. So one of those guys where I didn't even talk to him about it. I was like, okay, don't worry, downtown Josh. But he's a big personality on Twitter. I think he's a cool guy, despite his politics. And he told us an interesting thing, and it stuck with me. It was just about, not being poor, I guess is a way of putting it, right? And he said, the happiest people are, according to whatever studies, on people who win the lottery, people who win the lottery. He said the people who win the lottery are happiest between the moment they find out they won and the moment they cash in their lottery ticket. After that, it's not fun anymore, right? It's misery, it's trouble, it's people coming asking for stuff, saying no, making decisions. Want the appetite for more starts to become kind of insatiable. So he was just sort of warning us about that, right? He was warning us about that side of it, about what will make you happy and what won't make you happy. He goes, but you Bitcoiners, he says, you did something amazing. A bunch of you got to live for years in that happy period between when you bought the lottery ticket and when you cashed the lottery ticket in, or when you announced your winnings, I guess you could say. And you've extended that over years. You've known, you felt that you were changing everything. And even by psychologically saving your money in Bitcoin after everything that happened, you got to sort of extend that period. And it's true. I remember right away, it dawned on me. I remember being walking around through China in 2016 with Bitcoiners and talking about Bitcoin, and none of the troubles were there yet, right? Everyone could get in touch with everyone. It was really a small world. And everybody was optimistic about what we were doing. Everyone was very positive about it. And we all had that feeling, right? The feeling was we had stumbled upon something that was going to change the world, that made us happy and made us feel like we were the wealthiest people in the world, right? And it didn't mean you had the purchasing power at the time, but as 2017 hit, you could start to see how right you were, right? It sort of confirmed your feelings. But many of us knew anyway. We didn't need the 2017 confirmation. It just was according to schedule and on schedule. But if you're sitting around saying, oh, we can't, we have to be afraid of this political system, or the dollar is not changing, for God's sakes, more people want it now, right? Maybe, maybe. What I see is someone's got a viable alternative path, and that's the BRICS guys. I don't think they're going to be successful. It's another shitcoin. And it creates an opportunity where Bitcoin can become a psychological reference for everyone in the world who doesn't have a broken brain, who isn't stuck in a confirmation bias and a narrative bias situation, isn't too sure of themselves and everything they have been taught. It's the unlearning part. It's the unlearning part. So, in my mind, I don't think Bitcoin has to change at all. Right? We have Bitcoin, and we've got this new power of AI, which I think, and I've predicted here many times, will help us defend against the fake news. It will help us defend against those who would persuade us in the naughty ways, in the bad ways, in the dark arts, right? Who would use dark arts to persuade us, like the Janet Yellens, who are clearly signaling what's coming, and are signaling and doing what Brian mentioned, which is priming us for what's next, right? You don't need anyone else to tell you that they are priming us for shadow banking, and which is code, right? It's code. So indeed, right, go to El Salvador. There are many states in the United States where I think you're going to be just fine, right? U.S. federalism is going to be flexible and dexterous enough, and start thinking about building citadels for real, for real. Beauty on told me it was a LARP, and he says Bitcoin cult fantasy nonsense spewed out by people who can't bake bread and never mind lay bricks or shoot deer or an intruder. I mean, I don't know if Beauty on's from America. I think he's from Europe. Um, but and he says there can be no citadels. It's all or nothing. I don't know if we're going to fix what was there. We might let it rot, right? I don't know. I don't have a ton of appetite to go fix New York City. Like, I love New York City. I loved it. It was the greatest. I had a great time living there. But I'm not risking anything to go around broken brain people. And again, I don't know if we need to confront the broken brain people, right? I think we can, and I'm not saying run and hide either. I'm not saying run and hide. There's plenty of space. Let them kill themselves, right? Like, that's it. It even happened I read in the news in um, Belgium. One of the AI talked one of these climate doomers into doing the thing you can do in Canada and in Belgium with a doctor's help. I don't want to. It's too gross, but I mean, there's gonna be more of that, right? If your brain is so broken that you're worried the world's gonna end, like there's enough positive news out there. You can choose one or the other, right? I think it's choosing time, is I guess what it comes down to. I think Bitcoiners, we don't have to choose to change what went before in order to choose Bitcoin. We can just choose Bitcoin and build new. Now, it's somewhat heartless for the people who can't. It's not saving everyone, right? But I think people have their own choices to make, and it's a choosing time now. You got to. It's no longer. Oh, I'm anxious about the government, and I'm anxious about the arrest of the president. No, no. I mean, you have to choose. Do you care, or do you want to build a new world? Am I going to go and fight to get Washington cleaned up? Let it rot. I mean, let it rot. It's going to clean itself up eventually. If it can only rot and fester for so long. And the idea that, um, we've heard from Biden, oh, your guns can't stop you. We got tanks and F-14s. Well, remember the poem that someone shared, right? Which is like, it's not that simple, right? We know where you can't run a military against American people. They're too armed. They're going to go to where the fighter pilots live eventually. So we got a choice, right? We can build, and that's what it's come down to. It's time to choose. Build new, stay with the old systems and try and fix them. My choice is to build new. Now, again, I think Vermont is fresh clay, if you will. There's plenty to build off of there, right? The Constitution of Vermont, which guarantees farmers can sell direct to consumers without any federal inspections, is probably all that is needed for most states to get out of the yoke of the FDA and all that, and get rid of the cartels of grocery stores. And if just that is done, I think we're going to solve mental health in Vermont by 100%. Just that, right? Just getting people on our good Vermont food. All right, let's get some quotes here, and then a lot of comments, a lot of ranting today. Did you hear Don Jr. on? No, I didn't. I did see it, but it wasn't playing. I was at the other end of the house when I scrolled through it, and I don't. At the other end of the house, I don't have connection. I can read tweets, but my video comes in a bit choppy, so I forgot to do that. Yeah, Lizzie's geriatric arm. Remember I told you who was in her army yesterday? I met some real bank lobbyists. They're in it. They're ready to go. The bank lobbyists. Poor gerbils. Well, one of the funniest things that Richard Gere actor ever did in his career. You know Richard Gere. I don't know if everyone knows Richard Gere, but he there was a rumor, like an urban myth in the 90s, that he was checked himself into a hospital because a gerbil was in his ass, and he never corrected it. Now, I don't think it's true, but it kind of helped him in a way, weirdly, weirdly. Because it's like not true, I don't think. Yeah, it is fiat is a decoupling of from nature, exactly, and I think that's the pendulum that we're dealing with here. Right? I think that's the pendulum. The AlphaGo idea. Is AlphaGo the? I don't know what idea that is, Daniel. I'll look it up though. Did everyone stack out yesterday? A little bit. Didn't like the price too much, but CK with a good morning, CK. Hope you're doing well. India, they put the sitting member of parliament for defaming Modi. Oh, did they? Oh no. Bad news. If Keith Oberman wore glasses. Get ready to buy the conference dip. Well, I think we get a bump usually when people join in Bitcoin. I think we get a bump. I think we get a bit of a bump. We'll see. Yeah, think of the Havoc AI making realistic phone calls. Yeah, it's the one thing I'll hand the intellectuals and the academics over the years is this is another one of those Marshall McLuhan. Canadians are really good at understanding America and American media, and Marshall McLuhan, with a lot of his postmodern stuff, people got sick if you did a humanities degree of hearing postmodernism, and then other people don't understand what it means. It was a real thing. It is a real thing, and AI and these deep fakes bring us into a world that only Marshall McLuhan, I think, can help you navigate, and some of this idea around postmodernism. So it is definitely a new. It's a bit of a IQ level up for some. The IQ is amazing. They just need to give it real time data. I think they're going to. One could really accelerate their access. We want to escape to El Salvador. I mean, it's a good thing these days. Right? Yeah, the machines have been rigged since George Bush. Yeah, that don't let anyone tell you that it's a Democrat thing about election manipulation. It's everybody. That's why there isn't any appetite to fix it. That's why, right? As we've mentioned it here as Bitcoiners, we understand the engineering trade-offs just from being interested in Bitcoin, that you can have it easy or you can have it credible. Easy to use or credible system. We chose hard credibility over easy. They made easy the mantra in U.S. elections across the board, and that's why things have gotten so shitty. They're completely incredulous now. I don't even think we have elections. You can't even count it as an election. People go, they call it an election day, and you check a piece of paper and a thing that is a voting box, but it's not. It's not that, right? We loved Atami La Libertad. Yeah, I've been to El Salvador once, but it was just before. It's worse. The illness that has infected the West is more like a zombie apocalypse. It's pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty close. Pronouns. Yeah. She's the Van Gogh tainter. Yes, she is. Yeah. She is. What is it? Uh, does everybody else start listening on 2x when you join late? Nice, Lucky. Yeah, I think I speak fast enough for normal Silicon Valley people listening because I know they listen to everything at 1.5x or 2x. Daniel says 1.5 for me. Good. I live in a very rural part of this. Great potential out here for citadels and free trade farming. Yeah, I think I don't know Beauty On's exact story, but I think he's European, and I've been to Europe and I've seen what they call hunting. That's not what happens in America. Like that's not it. You pay some rich guy to go shoot a deer that was like raised to be shot on a deer farm with some trees around. I mean, that's not how it works in America. And everyone hunts in rural America. I mean, where I live, in that season, that's all it is bucks on top of trucks, right? That's all you see. Like everywhere, everyone knows how to hunt. You have to keep yourself from hunting. There's so much nuisance around that I gotta sometimes say, well, I wish it was in season. Where do I get those doe tags? They call it. Some people get the doe tags because you can't hunt females, right? Some people can for population control. 1.5, Daniel says he listens to it, and that's where I stayed. La Libre is pretty nice, especially by the pier. Yeah, I got to make it down there. Went years ago, just before Bitcoin stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Not rich, but Bitcoin gives you. That's what it all comes down to. Right? Be careful listening to sped up. It will make you super impatient. Yeah. True. Yeah. I've done that before. My dad won the lottery and completely changed him. Sudden riches without working for it is pretty overwhelming. Yeah, it is. It is. It is. Mm. I've seen the mortality figure on lotto winners. It is bad. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen it. Yeah. And that's what he meant, right? That period before you get the money, that little window is the happy time. And I do believe that Bitcoiners have expanded that happy time. That's what I meant. It saves a lot of time, so now generally I cannot listen on normal speed. It saves a lot of time, so I generally cannot. Oh no, sorry. Money buys you time, but not purpose. Time without purpose can be depressing. Yeah, you're right, Mick. To me, yeah, I knew a lot of. I've known a lot of. Canada is a small country, so it's not hard to meet the elite. The Laurentian elite, they're called, and I've seen that firsthand. Wow, I see it now regarding living in the pre-winning era of $1 million Bitcoin. Great analogy with lottery. Yeah. It's what I think allows us to get through all this stuff with a cheery outlook, right? I can do all those things. He said, "Yeah, I thought so too." I think that's a European bias. I think he's got a European bias on that. I love Beauty On. I think he's got a European bias on that. Europeans, I went on my honeymoon. I've lived in Europe a bunch and generally go pretty often. My wife and I went to Corsica for our honeymoon, and we had, they got mosquito issues there. So I went down to the local hardware store and I said, and we didn't have a screen door. I said, I'm going to buy some screen and I'm just going to, find like put it on. Right. And so I get to the hardware store in Corsica. It's a fucking arts and crafts store, man. They don't do that stuff. Like there isn't like just home improvement stuff. You just go down and fix it yourself. They're long gone from that. It was literally like you know, decorations. Like everything's pre-made. They didn't have any screens, nothing like that. Nothing like a hardware store in America. Now, that was probably the first time in my life I'd been to a hardware store in Europe. I'd lived there for years, but I had apartments, and you never have to, everything's so old and already built, and then you can't change it because it's so old, and then you can't put in, you see the cupboards in France, they're like a mile high. They don't just make those. So you live with the shitty old ones you have. It's not as like DIY home improvement like America. That's not a thing in Europe like it is. As far as I can tell, I could be wrong. That's just France. So I'm not an expert on all parts of Europe, but that's my understanding. Now, their places are beautiful. I understand why they're not DIY. They don't need to do as much. They built it in a different era when it wasn't all cheap crap. So it's on Bitcoin. Yeah. I know. That's what I thought. All that stuff, bro. Yeah, who can't? I mean, who can't shoot a deer? Like, get a gun. Well, that's the thing. In Europe, where do you get your gun? Like, they're right. They don't know what they're doing, right? It's true. I think Americans could build citadels. In the war, in World War One, here's a good story about Europe and Canadians. This will make your Canadian people proud. Because as much as I make fun of Canada when we get together in the mornings for having a collection of the stupidest people in the world, um, they have some skills that are amazing. Quebec, the rest of Canada, all of it, and it's things like this, right? So when World War One was going on and the Canadians arrived, they didn't wait to the last minute like the Americans. They were there early with because they weren't a real country. So Britain was at war. You had to fight. And the stories of Canadians in World War One are such that when they arrived, especially the Albertans and the Western Canadians who had just learned about building citadels and new cities, and they just gone out and done the pioneering. So when they got to the war front in Europe, the rest of Europe was like, what is going on here? They were digging trenches and engineering walls and all of this stuff that no one had thought of, and we're like, what are you guys doing? And they were just crazy. And that is still in Canada, right? I would never, if a bunch of, even today, a bunch of Canadians were left on an island, they would figure it out. They would figure it out. They would, like, versus other countries, they would have the skills, the skill set. Americans too. Americans too. Depends on the area. America, the suburbs, I think, have liquidated a bit of that. In Canada as well. I mean, there's suburbs you could go to that would be like that. But there you go. Is a good example of kids today getting poor and desperate. Yeah, that's where I want it's the fiat spawns exactly. This is, Bitcoin Graffiti has it right. Maybe Phoebe is a good example of the kids of today getting poor and desperate. I mean, they're not in a great spot in the fiat Ponzi. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So I don't know if we have to confront it. If we are on our own and we change the systems, I think they're going to become healthy again. I hope. I don't revel in people signing up for MAID or whatever that person in Belgium did after their AI told them to. Right? I don't want to live in. I don't like that, obviously, but it's happening. So what are you going to do? Vermont has such a good food scene, Daniel. It's awesome. It's simple. Just go down to your farmer, and because you can buy it, stupid Quebec, you can't buy raw milk anymore. And even friends of mine that I grew up with, when I asked them, can I get some raw milk from you? They would whisper as if someone was in the fucking room. I can't do that. I can't do that. What are you doing, man? I grew up with you. Like, give me some raw milk. No. Shh. Can't do that. Like, is there spies around or something? Like, just pathetic. Now, I get it. I don't want to get them in trouble, so I don't force it. But Vermont made it a matter of law that a farmer can sell raw milk to. Now, I get why a store can't sell it. Liability. I'm not here to help grocery stores, right? I don't care about them. They're worse than banks. So there you go. AlphaGo is Google's. Oh, I didn't know that. Game AI. I didn't know that. You said Bukele cut all taxes for all, but what I understand is yeah. Sorry, I didn't. Bushmaster. If I read that incorrectly, it's because I didn't take the tweet. I took a screenshot of someone of Bukele did a check mark saying he did it, and I took that as my screen from my notes today. I should have taken his original tweet, which explicitly said it. But indeed, when I read it correctly a few days ago, it's just on industries and to get people to move there. Yes, it's not for everybody. Yeah, sorry if I said that wrong. Event today at 8 p.m. I don't know. Is there? So that's the, I don't know. Oh yeah, what about the Twitter algo? Yeah, I was gonna mention that today. I had the notes. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. They broke it all down. They open sourced it. It looks so. It turns out likes are the best thing you can do. Um, Likes are the most that give the most ride. Um, the follower count ratio thing was a bit weird. Like if you follow too many people and you don't have enough followers, you get ignored. Um, I didn't really. I think it's awesome you open sourced it and it's interesting. I don't think I brought the full notes. I did read the whole breakdown today though of what it meant. I think the algorithm now put pressure on other sites that feed you opinions. Yeah, that I think is there. I noticed that. Yeah. Great responses. Yeah. Got to get the dough tags and Kilabambi in there, so they are. I know. I got a friend who is a he gets the license. He gets the tags for the green belts around our cities in Canada to make sure because they get they're so well fed. We have these green belts around Toronto and a few other cities, so no development for like 10 miles or something. Once you get out of the city before they can build new suburbs, so they will sit around cities, and of course they're so great for deer and they got trails and they're great. They're nice. But you got to cull and you got to cull the females in the winter when they have no calves and so I got to eat a raw one once because one Christmas he had to go take care of one and he had just skinned it and it was perfect. You didn't have to cook it or anything. It was native style, man, Mohawk. Because we got. Don't forget, Canada still has a lot of natives, Mohawk, Iroquois in particular. All Six Nations except for the Cherokee, who joined the Six Nations. So the Five Nations are all in Canada still, and pretty like a lot of area that I would go through, and so I used to hang out there all the time and knew a lot of people, and they have a much less restrictive hunting stuff. I watch a lot of builders. The European ones are nothing like Canada and the U.S. Yeah. Now, I think they have expert carpenters and builders, right? But I believe it's all regulated, and you got to hire someone, and they don't put up the volume that we put up. And if they do construction, it's not like post and beam. They don't do barn raisings. Put it that way. They're not raising barns. I'm going to be doing a barn raise. I'm doing a little post and beam on my farm this summer for a guest house and I'm planning it right now. I can't imagine any Bitcoin European planning their own post and beam unit the way I am. But again, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I don't know enough about it. Being a Mainer, I feel like I could survive anywhere. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, 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 yeah. There's Maine, the last great temperate forest on Earth that spills into Canada, Vermont, everywhere. But that's the last of them on Earth and there's enough space in that area to you could build city after city and farm after farm. That's all amazing farmland that is still virgin natural and rammed with wildlife. I mean, people don't get it. I got mountain lions all around me. I got like we're in where you could do a safari where I live, like mink, everything. I got when I walk down the street to my little village, I can see a river otter most days, foxes, like, all the time. I mean, all the time, all the time. Homemade deer jerky, the milk whisperer, just intrigued, but Bitcoin City should be open, free of taxes. Yeah, no, there's not gonna be any taxes. We're going to figure out energy, Bushmaster. That's the thing. When we incentivize, so what JP is not understanding here is that without US force to close the door on any other trade for energy, which made oil the only energy resource. Think about that. All you need to know about the corruption of the American energy system with the military is this: that the greatest energetic system ever designed on Earth was put into a submarine, which has hardly any people, right? The nuclear submarine. And that was it. We never did anything else but build submarines that can last forever to shoot nuclear bombs. Now, why wasn't that in cargo? Why wasn't that in any other boat? Why weren't cities built out of these things? Why were the only small nuclear reactors they built at scale put into military ships? I'll tell you why. It was to make sure the petrodollar perpetuated so you wouldn't build nuclear powered cargo ships and nuclear powered whatever, right? So with petrodollar going away, things are going to change quick, and there's not going to be taxes. And in the end, we're going to make money time. Time is money, and money is time. And the only convertible unit for time will be Bitcoin. And you spend both. You're going to spend time. You're going to spend money. But it's not going to be on energy. Now, with the US dollar and the system we have, time is actually the cost of energy, the cost of the war machine, the cost of information. It's an amalgamation of things we put together that look like money. And we're good as money 80 years ago. They're dead. The follow ratio is probably a proxy for bot filtering. Bots have high. Yeah. I mean, it looked interesting. I read through the whole thing. I didn't think I was gonna include it in today's show. It didn't quite fit, so it didn't make my last cut. I take about an hour to put the show together, so if something doesn't make it, I'm more than happy to cut it out. I assume the code release doesn't help with building an actual app like Twitter. It might. I mean, it's pretty detailed. Don't be a fool. Buy Bitcoin. They wear a hard hat and it's true. It's true. No, next time you're there, go in Europe to a hardware store and laugh. It's like a Hallmark store. It's hilarious. It's like Winners or something without the clothes. It's got like, or not Winners, Marshalls. Marshalls. TJ Maxx. It's like TJ Maxx. I'm not kidding. They have a few built things. There's like fans, portable air conditioners. Not even. That's what I wanted to buy the time I went. I had to buy a $80 fucking fan. And that was my only strategy to keep mosquitoes out, was I bought a fan to shoot at the door so I could keep the door open so it wasn't hot and I could sleep on my in the house. It was very hot when I was there. So, all right, team, we went a little long today. No show tomorrow. I'm going to take the Sunday off. But I'll see you guys Monday. I'll see you all Monday. Take it easy, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Be good. Peace.